Good morning and welcome to Saturday special of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Every age has a certain icon. Either they have one or they create one. And as time passes, these icons are revered, an aura is created around them, and they are deemed to be a permanent, eternal feature. The relevance taken for granted for all times. The reality is not that. Every icon, every celebrity, every leader is relevant for some time, not for all times. Changes in social, ethical, cultural modes also impact the relevance of those icons. But mentally, people still revere them, ignore their blind spots willfully, and as such, they appear to be colossus. But reality, they are colossus with the feet of clay. The relevance may no longer be there. Looking at them, looking at their work, howsoever great it may be, a time comes when those icons are not relevant except as parts of mythology or of tale. Now, Bhishma Pitamah, the grand old man of Mahabharata, is even today revered in India for his loyalty, mystical loyalty, of course, as we'll see, for his oath and his adherence to that oath, howsoever deleterious, harmful, and painful it was for the civilization of that era. Bhisham, the word names terrible, horrible, fearful, fierce. And this interpretation of the name was by one of the greatest Indic scholars, Monier Williams. This word also used to describe Rudra, the fierce Vedic god, as well as Bharakshas, the demons. Now, the very name shows that the eternity is not supposed to revere him, but fear. The other names giving Gorang, the one with a fair body, Savet Veera, the white warrior, of one who is heroic white and all the weapons of the white color. Now, these names today are clearly racist and are symptomatic of the much hated, much derided white supremacy. And when those words, which are derided words, which are condemned words, are used to revere a person, the relevance is always mythical, not real. Looking at the life and the work, we find his was full of contradictions. His abduction of the three princesses of Kashi, his unwillingness to accept Vyasa's offer to retire with Satyavati in the forest before the war, his agonies on the battlefield, and his famous discourse, which I'll prefer to call banal, useless, talk on Dharma. So, three questions about his life are worth considering today when we take into consideration the relevance of Bishop Pitamah. The first, of course, is why did he accept the generalship of the army when he was 19-year old? He was 90-year old when Kurukshetra was the battlefield between Pandavas and Kauravas. And he accepted the generalship. He could easily have retired. In the Hindu Varna Shastra, 75 is the age of Banprastha. Chapter 25, you are in Brahmacharya. 25 to 50, you are in Grastashram, the domestic life. 50 to 75, you are in sannyas, that you detach yourself, and then Banprastha, you leave the world, go to the forest. And in the age of 90, when he should have been living in as an ascetic in the forest, he comes and takes up the general. Even today, 90 is an age when we do not consider that a person is fit, either in mind or in body, to lead an army. The normal retirement age of 65, 75, even the politicians who are the helm of affairs are usually retire at the age of 80s. The maximum is 80s, and you'll hardly see anybody except in the dictatorial countries or in the monarchies, the leaders being above that age. Second question. As one who was no great warrior except his mythical battle with Parshuram, why did he accept the generalship of the Kaurava army? His only claim to being a great warrior was his fight with Parshuram. That was only fight. He had fought other wars, but he was never successful. And as a Kshatriya who had discharged his duties very well, he had given his nephews the training they required to be kings. Why did he not relinquish power as he was supposed to do? Why was he clinging to power, especially when he knew that nobody is going listening to him? And as a matter of fact, any sensible man who has not gone berserk would have seen that he was treated like dirt by his grandson, grandnephew, Duryodhana. And in a fit of pity, he should have said, okay, look at the trash. Your son is not behaving properly. And I don't want to have anything to do with a dharma, irreligion, unethical, immoral activities. But he did not do it. And this rule applied to ordinary family man immersed in his own affairs. Did Bhishma think that he was immune because he belonged to that category of man who sacrifices self and live only for the others? Did he feel as such people feel that he could never give up his responsibilities? And was it that he was suffering from a phobia that if he leaves, he'll be ignored and die? Honestly. Then look at his feelings. He was a great man. He was present during the gambling game in Hastinapur when the empress of that time, Draupadi, the wife of Pandava, was humiliated. And that's why she questioned the dharma of Yudhishthira in losing the war. Bhisham could not answer her. And then he said, well, dharma is very subtle, meaning thereby that dharma would change, the concept would change from time to time. And then where was dharma? Ethical values when he kidnapped three princes of Varanasi and then refused to marry Amba, who was left alone, lonely because nobody was willing to marry her. And she then said, okay, then since you have kidnapped me, Bishop, you should marry me. He refused to do that. And that was his undoing because Amba was reincarnated as Khandi. And that was the cause of his death. Was he fighting for Hastinapur? Possibly. Was he fighting for Dharma? No. So look at its relevance. If today such a person was living, he would be deified and as a political figure, intelligent, capable, good general, unscrupulous leader. So as far as being unscrupulous is concerned, yes, he is relevant. As far as ethical icon is concerned, he is not. Then there's contradiction in his character. He was one of the most contradictory creatures in Mahabharata episode. He took an oath that he will protect the king. Now, protecting the king was an oath, but what the oath should have been protect the kingdom, not the king, not the person. And then even the king, according to him and according to all the scholars at that time, the real king was Pandu, who had died, and Dhritarashtra was a regent. He was not a king. It's like Governor General of Canada. She is not the head of the state. She is representative of the head of the state. Similarly, Dhritarashtra was not a king. He was representative of the king, regent of the king, till the time Yudhishthira came of the age and took over. But the selfish greed of Hastinapur regent Dhritarashtra and his son Duryodhana conspired to ensure that Yudhishthira does not become a king, and ultimately the war took place. Now, Mahabharata, the revered text, is often misunderstood, and it is apparently understood to be limited to a war within the Kuru lineage, a war between Kauravas and Pandavas, a war between Dharma and Dharma. And look, the man who says that he took an oath to fight for Dharma is the general commander in chief of the adharmic army, irreligious army. Isn't that a contradiction by itself? It is like that the war takes place between Russia and USA or China and USA. And the commander of the US army is an avowed communist. What sort of a commander would he be? In modern age, he'll immediately be removed and tried for treason. What happens is in mythological stories where we blindly follow the icon, the oversimplification deprives of the immense knowledge it offers. It's a manifestation of the varied possibilities of human behavior, their actions, and the results of those actions. Each character of the epic represents an enormous opportunity to learn from. And one such character, of course, is Bhishma, originally named as Devrat. I fully accept that his unconditional, dedicated service to the throne deserves to be respected. But then the question arises, was it a proper decision? Was it a wise decision? Yes, it made him a revered son. But what about his duties towards his citizens as a prince? There is a conflict between his loyalty to his father and to the generations unborn of his father, and loyalty to the kingdom, to the empire, and to the citizens. Bhishma had acquired skills of being a good ruler over the years. And through his oath, he decided to let go of the throne to Satyavati's children without anyone knowing whether they'll be good rulers. Now you take the oath, which is not at all pertinent, relevant. It's a leap in dark. Should a sensible man have taken an oath? Should a logical man have taken such an oath? He could have said, okay, I would take an oath that I would not be ruled as long as the children are capable enough. But not so. By letting the undeserved rule a kingdom, he was in fact indulging in a traitorous activity. It can't be termed an selfless act. Should we be honest and brave enough to call it foolish? I know many of my friends listening today would be horrified. As once I said that had Guru Nanak been living in this age, he might have been prosecuted for being a deadbeat father, which he was. As a father, he did not educate his children. He was a great leader, he was a great scholar, he was a great poet, he was a great ascetic. But he left his wife in lurch and left his children unlettered. We have got to be realistic. Bhishma was absolutely foolish. And in the modern age of enlightenment, where duty to the country and the citizens is much more important, he cannot be deemed relevant. And this ardent disciple of Dharma was wrong in interpretation of the true meaning of Dharma. Okay, his intentions may have been very good, but his oath was a result of a myopic vision. And as I usually say, way to hell is paved with good intention. He, the elderly man, through was selfless accepted, but he was a mere puppet who acted as per the intents of the kings who were not competent and who didn't deserve to be kings. He gave up his throne, but giving up the throne does not mean that he should have given up his right to question the authority as well. He bade goodbye even to the moral authority. And this cherished son of soil was guilty of inaction and ignorance. It's true that leading an ascetic life and renouncing the throne was meant to end all possibilities of the future family feuds. But could he not foresee that if he is siding with injustice and the forces of evil, ultimately it will be a disaster? He was a part of the cabinet that chose to remain numb and dumb and blind. He witnessed the heinous wrongdoing of her being disrobed. Why did he not raise his voice? His dharma of protecting his oath and not going against the imprudent act of the king, was it more important than preventing the modesty of a helpless woman screaming for justice? And that helpless woman was no other than the empress at that time. His whole world revolved around his oath and mistaken oath and belief to protect his oath till the life's death. And the result was that Kurukshetra became the family graveyard. Would you think this man would have been relevant today? He would have been put in the lunatic asylum. And then what Bhisham does, he teaches a very important lesson that we often skip. Our thoughts, our beliefs, our reality have repercussions beyond our limited sphere. Bhisham's oath and his persistent effort to protect it was because he thought that man's oath is bigger than any act of injustice. He was rigid and unwelcoming towards the other oaths that we see. And here it's quite relevant because all the politicians today swear, take oaths, and the first thing is they interpret their oaths in a selfish manner, and that's what he was doing. Haven't we seen people identifying with a belief system and becoming gradually submissive to it? Some people become bhagats, the other become pseudo seculars. But the belief system is there. Our belief in the one system makes us blind to the other systems. And rather than discussing, we debate over them. The effort is not to create harmony, but to prove each other wrong. That was the lesson of Bhishma. Now, looking at his relevance today, if we consider him as an ethical, powerful role setter, then his relevance is zero. If we think of him as a politician who was more involved in protecting his proteges so that he could exploit the situation, then it's quite relevant because he is a typical Temne Hall politician. He was not a scholar, though the people impute to him scholarship, but he was a person who was in fact Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, two personalities. And that is what the typical politicians of the world today are. So modern, if you have got to clear it from two things, either see it from the point of dharma, ethics, fair play, honesty, dedication to the country, then he is not relevant. He cannot be a role model. Take him as somebody who was more interested in his professed loyalty even to the incompetent, who was saying something about dharma and the religion and acting exactly opposite, in fact, leading the charge against dharma, then of course it's relevant. So it's subjective. But we have got to separate the chaff from the grain, and then we will find that he is not relevant from the point of view he professed to uphold. He is relevant from the point of view of what he professed to detest and hate. You have to take your pick. But from my point of view, such icons are not worthy of being called icons. Dishonest, corrupt, ineffective. At the most, they can be angels beating their luminous wings in the void without any impact on the world. And they had better be consigned to the graves, to where they belong, rather than being revered where they don't deserve it. Think about it. Thank you.